Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I took that roller coaster of a ride and turned it into my book called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach people how to use failure as your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every company win. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We're a nearshore software engineering firm helping existing engineering teams scale. And today I am joined by Vernon O'Donnell, who is the CEO of Voxel. He has been a long time tech executive, broad experience with B2B SaaS management. We're going to have some fun here. Vernon, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. Really excited to join the program today. And
You
totally
bet.
agree, by the way, the best way to learn is falling flat on your face.
I
Strong
really
line.
wish there was a better, easier way, but when you have wins and successes, you can often take things for granted that when you fail, you're going to pay closer attention to.
Yep, that's right.
And Vernon's a fellow Chicago guy like myself. Unfortunately, our Bears did not do good yesterday.
But Steve,
hey.
I am a Colts fan. And I went to IU. So I am apparently from the football state of Indiana, which up until 2025, I didn't know was the case. But we're not a basketball state anymore. We're a football state now.
I gotcha. Indiana's grown to that. I gotcha. Well, Vernon, take our listeners through the journey of your career. What led you to be the CEO of Voxel?
Yeah, I'll do it as fast as I can, Steve. So I think going back to the earliest point in my career, I enlisted in the Army when I was 17 to help pay for college. This was pre 9/11, so it's a different era. It was really more about economics than any sort of mission orientation. But ultimately spent some time in the service, some time overseas, got a strong alignment to mission and feeling like there needed to be more from a job than just financials. Don't get me wrong, that's important, but an outcome. Post-military, went to grad school. Post-grad school, started my career at Grainger Industrial Supply. You probably know it well, being a Chicago guy. Large supply chain company here in the Chicagoland area, doing brand strategy, communication sorts of work. Jumped around there in a few different jobs. I inconveniently started my corporate career in 2000, which was an unfortunate time to be in a growth mode mindset. And so you learn a lot about how to take businesses apart and ultimately put them back together. Went to Apollo Education Group, and that's where I made the jump over to tech. So Apollo was in the process of kind of structuring itself to go private. They ultimately did, and as part of that journey, there was actually an exploration of spinning out its homegrown technology as a standalone platform, or potentially selling that to private equity. That got me really excited about the notion of building a tech platform. And was the big jumping off point to move out of larger traditional Fortune 5 companies doing strategy into much more roll up your sleeves sort of technology work. And then from there, have spent the last 11, almost 12 years in the deep tech SaaS space. I'm actually kind of at the time, I didn't know I was at the pioneering edge of computer vision. I started at a computer vision sports company in 2014 called Stats Perform. We were working with the NBA, a bunch of professional soccer leagues around the world on player performance and athlete monitoring, which is a nice segue to Voxel and what we're doing today. After Stats, I went to a startup called Project 44, supply chain visibility, really about kind of connecting all the nodes of the various supply chain to help with predictability around outages from a supply chain perspective, disruptions, and thereafter. And from there, ultimately ended up the CEO of Voxel. The reason this is such a great fit for me is it combined all kind of three aspects of that. What we're doing here is computer vision and applied AI to help make industrial work sites safer. So that's largely warehousing, distribution centers, seaports, airports, and the like. So heavily supply chain oriented, all foundational tech, and the nucleus of the company is computer vision. And the beautiful thing, it's also a strong mission alignment, right? So it's not just about the bottom line impact of reducing claims and reducing lost days and the top line impact of increasing throughput. It's also the mission orientation of sending workers home safer.
Wow. And thanks for sharing your story. And I mean, so tell us more about Voxel. What a great mission to make workplaces safer. Tell us a little more about the company.
Yeah. So the company itself, as I mentioned, applied AI, focused on environmental health and safety. So we're helping identify all sorts of problems, right? Where do you have ergonomics risks? So an inefficient design where people are overreaching or improper bending too often, leading to strains, but then those strains can lead to back problems, shoulder problems, knee problems. It's not just a quality of life issue. There are a significant amount of insurance claims tied to that and lost days, but also much higher order things, right? We're doing vehicle safety, speeding, no stops, collisions, near misses, making sure vehicles are interacting safely with each other, but also with people, and then all kinds of environmental factors. Are people working at heights with the proper protective gear? Are they properly secured? Are there spills on the floor? Are doors left ajar? And the beautiful thing is that's taken us out of the Stone Ages, where safety was a person walking the floor with a clipboard, or even worse, but more often after an injury's already occurred, right? Even including serious injuries and fatalities. Then you're doing a post-mortem, 6, 9, 12 months later, you're instituting some changes. And by that point in time, who knows how many other incidents and injuries have occurred. We move that into near real time. We have seconds of latency, so we're able to help identify these sorts of issues in a near real-time fashion, but also just in a continuous, ubiquitous approach. It's not a person with a clipboard observing. It's AI being able to actually digest billions of hours of footage, turn that into actionable data, and then provide that back to our customers in a way that they can seriously and materially impact worker safety and worker quality in their work environments.
Excellent. Now, you have a very impressive background, but tell us the story how you got this role as CEO.
Yeah, so the job, it's fat. So I'll say this first. I did not want to go back to a Series A company, which is what it was. I was not part of the founding team. I was brought in by the board to help scale the business up. And at this point in my time, I was like, going back to the early days, not so exciting. But this was a perfect fit for a few reasons. One, as I mentioned, I've been in the computer vision and computer vision adjacent space for a decade plus. So I've got a lot of experience with this sort of tech, the power of what this tech can do, and the opportunity it has. I think I'd be lying to say otherwise. The market opportunity is massive, right? There's tens of billions of dollars of waste every year at cost from an injuries perspective, and that's not even counting the soft cost of all of the labor impact and productivity impact. So big chance to have a real serious impact from a commercial perspective. But I think more personally to me, I mentioned I grew up in Indiana. I've been in Chicago for 20 plus years at this point, so I consider it home. But my family largely agricultural. They work in logistics. They work in manufacturing. I think I'm the first person in my family to have like a true office job, particularly in the tech sector. And I've seen firsthand what these sorts of injuries can do. One of my cousins had a very serious workplace accident, put him in a hospital for months, ultimately impacted his life for years thereafter. He's in a great spot now, but I saw what this could do to a family because it wasn't just about the injury in the moment. It was all the residual impact, all the impact to his mom who had to lean into help, and then the delays that put into his life. And so the ability to combine something I'm technically savvy in with a really big market opportunity with a personal mission just made it too good of an opportunity for me to pass up. And the board loved me because I've scaled companies before and understand the space. And so it was kind of a really great marriage of
How did you find out about the opportunity? Did you apply online? Did you know
no,
some?
no, was contacted by an executive recruiter. I wasn't necessarily looking. Contacted by an executive recruiter, had an initial conversation. Ultimately withdrew myself from the process and then put myself back in the process after meeting the board. It was heavily a board-led search, and so I spent a lot of time with the board members, a lot of
That
time with
was
the
probably
leaders.
a painful interviewing process if it was a board-led search.
I think at the end, I joke with one of the board members that it was 27 or 28 conversations, including at least 2 full days of in-persons. So yeah, it was a long process. But the great news about that, Steve, like you go through that much intensity in the search process, you get through all of the hurdles, right? You come in eyes open as a CEO to where the problems are. I knew the state of the pipeline. I knew the problems in the tech where they existed. Luckily, not many. The tech was really strong. I knew the talent issues. I knew the investor theses. And the same thing was true of them. Like they knew me well enough that we were able to hit the ground running really quickly from day one. And so typical message I give a lot of people in a lot of environments: take the pain up front. Like just front load the pain. And in this scenario, the interview process was painful, but that front loading the pain made sure the board and I were aligned from the moment I took the job.
Excellent. Well, so tell us about some current projects you guys are working on.
Yeah. So a couple of really exciting things that we're doing. We've just recently deployed AI generated recommendations. So not just seeing problems and helping people analyze and understand them, but actually how to solve them. The majority of our users are not health and safety professionals. They're the ops manager on a site in a manufacturing facility, or the plant manager, or a distribution center manager, or shift supervisor. So they care about safety. It's their team, right? And they may not have the expertise, the know-how, or just the serious amount of pattern recognition that you can that we have. The full-time certified safety professionals on our team, they partner with our AI engineers, and now not only are we identifying problem areas and hotspots, we're actually providing recommendations. Great example: you have a problem with improper bending in this part of the facility. The AI will recommend that you need to go from a one-step lift to a two-step lift, and put a lifting table in there to reduce back strain in an area where you're really highly likely to create some injuries and some claims.
So, like when you go into a new client, do you have your AI agents analyzing like years of footage, or how do you guys go about that?
No, luckily no. So here's the great news on two fronts. Typically, the types of risks that you see in a workplace are pretty common, right? Someone speeding is someone speeding is someone speeding, right? That's regardless of the environment. You just need to tune it to what their regulations are. Is it 15? Is it 5? Is it 3? Is it, whatever it is? Someone working at heights, that's just a relationship to the floor itself. And so we actually, a lot of our models on day zero are providing insights right out of the gates, standard problems, and then there's the continuous learning problem process from the algorithm. By about day 4 or 5, we actually sit down with the company and we provide an initial assessment of where do we see risk. There's a small calibration after that, and then it's ready to go by day 7, 8, and it's turned on and learning. And so
Wow, that's quick.
yeah, that's quick. And that's the beauty of this sort of applied AI. You have the power of we literally have about 7 billion hours of analyzed footage in the platform. So you get the benefit of the 7 billion hours, but you get the continuous learning of a deployed AI where it learns that environment. And so that does the work, the hard work of being able to apply these sorts of broad principles to specific environments. In supply chain, every site looks slightly different. And so it was never really going to be possible with a human cognition. You needed this sort of tech to really create this sort of possibility.
So the past 2 years is really when generative AI and agentic AI have become mainstream. What was your business? And I know you've been there just under 2 years. What was it doing 3 years ago when AI hasn't made the commercial advancements that it had? How has
Yeah,
that evolved?
yeah. So well, I mean, and just to clarify one point, we're applied AI or physical AI, not agentic AI. So we do have some agentic workflows, but largely we're not generative. We're analyzing, interpreting, and then kind of reapplying algorithms. Up until about 2 years ago, it was a struggle. You had to educate the market. You had a lot of reticence for buyers, even 15 to 18 months ago. And then there was the whole thing, and I always joke, you have Drake stealing Tupac's voice to insult Kendrick Lamar. And so then everybody's stressed about, what are you going to use our video footage for? Are you going to be creating all these simulations? And it's like, no. One, that's not the type of AI we are. But then two, ultimately, you own this data, right? We're just applying our algorithms to it. And so after some education process, that helped us get customers closed. But what really changed everything is what you called out. 15, 18 months ago, there was just a change in the market in terms of mindset, adoption. We actually just had a customer we talked to, small freezer warehouse in the Midwest. The safety manager is a woman who's been there for 40 years. And she was talking about, she's like, oh, you guys are like Chat GPT. I use that every day, which is crazy. Like I can't, like 2 years ago, no way were you getting that answer. And so you're just seeing this rapid shift in terms of people understanding the power of what AI can do for them. And now it's just about educating them to the specific problems we're solving with AI and how that can benefit them in their workspace.
Excellent. Excellent. Tell us something about your software engineering team, how many engineers you have, the work model you guys do.
Yeah, so we are 100% of our engineers are based in the Bay Area. One exception, we have one guy down in Los Angeles, but he's worth it. 10x or early guy at Twitch, he was worth the thing. But otherwise, Team is all in the office. They're all in San Francisco. They spend a lot of time together. We've got 25, 26 engineers, give or take. We just had an offer go out. The person starts soon. Mid to high 20s. We've got a few more offers out, so we'll probably be 30 by the end of the month or the end of November. So in that phase, the
And
majority.
they're a 5 days in office model in San Francisco.
They're not 5 days. We've been lucky enough to avoid a mandate. People just want to be in the office. The type of tech that we're building and the type of AI, it requires so much collaboration. So we typically see people in the office 3 days a week. Some are in four, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, heavy days. Tuesday, Thursdays, very heavy. We're actually moving to a new office soon because we're at capacity and we're out of desks. So I've been able to, knock on wood, avoid having to set a hard mandate. Instead, what we've just created is an environment where the benefits of working together in person are shown in the course of the outcomes from the products and the course of the outcomes from the customer. And we'll even do things like bring customers on site, take our engineers on site to customer sites. And we just took them over across the Bay Bridge to a couple customer sites, loaded a bus up, let them walk a big physical space, see kind of all the risk in person. Engineers really respond to that. It helps them build better product. So it's really more about how do you create the right culture and mindset more than the mandate. And I'd say from a team perspective, a lot of them come from what's increasingly becoming more and more important in this sort of space: robotics degrees, applied AI degrees, deep tech. A lot of them come from autonomous vehicles, and less traditional kind of CS degrees, where it's someone who works, did a CS degree and then 3 years as a full stack or distributed systems engineer. It's somebody who's actually applied AI or done sort of something in the physical space, because that connectivity from the algorithm itself, from the technical development to the physical world is so critical to understand as you build this sort of product and scale it up.
Now, is San Francisco a headquarters for your company?
Yep, San Francisco is the headquarters. They commute out there. When I was out there every week for the first 6 to 9 months on the job, and am now going every other. You know, get used to it. I fly Monday mornings, fly back Thursday nights. I've got 4 kids in school. I'm still able to see most of their sporting events. Friday dinner and Sunday dinner are sacred in the O'Donnell house, but we're a San Francisco company. And it's fascinating to see. And I know this is not what you're asking, but it's a thing I always like to talk about. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, you started to see this trend of people taking engineering out of San Francisco, right? Engineering costs were so high, cost of labor was so high, real estate was so high. Austin starts to become a hotbed, and Denver, and even Charlotte, and obviously Boston and New York, but New York doesn't really give you any cost leverage. What we've seen is, given this boom in the AI market across all aspects of it, generative, agentic, computer vision, what have you, physical sciences, it's become an incredible source of gravity again. And all the best engineers are starting to flock back out there. You see the pull that San Francisco is having. You even see it in the city, like more and more down. We're in Soma, the neighborhood, and in Fidei in the general area. You see every time I walk by the Blue Bottle Coffee or the coffee shop, there's 3 founders talking to a VC looking to set up their office and all in the AI space. So the reason I say all that is it's just become increasingly evident as a CEO that for what, all the various factors, San Francisco is the home of this sort of tech, and you've got to be there. That's where the best talent is. It's where the density of talent is. And so really it's about how do you optimize just for that reality in the business world.
And I've definitely read a lot how San Francisco has the revitalization of it has been going well, especially with the AI boom that's going on. From a engineering perspective, though, it's still some of the more expensive engineers on the market in terms of salary requirements. Have you seen and you guys have a unique niche. You mentioned they go on site with clients. Have you seen a niche to diversify from a cost structure perspective, maybe some non-core engineering tasks?
So yes, definitely. And I would say San Francisco engineers are definitely by far the most expensive.
No doubt.
Yeah,
No.
like it's not even a question, right? No doubt. But there's that density of talent, the quality of talent, I think makes that expectation there. What I've seen and what I believe is there's an inflection point where the opportunity to nearshore or offshore or create secondary markets becomes really viable, right? And you focus your scale there. Once you have, like, we've established product market fit as a company, we've got 75 customers, we're growing over 100% year over year. So like we're on a really good trajectory in growth and customer acquisition, but our product is still kind of really in that scale, understanding how do we 10x the product from a delivery perspective. I think as we answer those questions, the paradigm shifts. And it's like, okay, now we have the scaling playbook. Now we know how we take this to 2,000 locations in parallel with zero touch from a technical team perspective. Then it starts to be, how do we think about cost efficiency, right? And leverage, and how do we build more leverage into the economic models? And do you nearshore in Mexico? Do you offshore in, Central Europe or Eastern Europe, or in India? And I think there's a natural point where that makes sense. You can't focus on it too early, because then you make a bad decision for the product for the sake of cost savings. But if you wait too long, you just become really inefficient from a capital perspective. I wish I could give you like a really scientific answer, but it's like, it's that balance, right? But I do think there is a point where you have to have that balance. We just aren't there yet.
So as a tech leader here in Q4 2025, what's the biggest challenge you're facing right now?
Well, two things. One, the war in talent is crazy again, right? It reminds me of like 2017, losing people, junior engineers, to offers for 50,000 more than what you budgeted, which was already 25,000 more than what you were paying 2 years ago. So the war for tech talent is real, and I think that's a thing that I stress about every day. From a macro perspective, and hard to comment on this without veering us too much into politics, just the uncertainty in the macroeconomic environment, and particularly for a lot of our customers that were manufacturing and supply chain and hard goods and seaports and airports, just the lack of clarity on tariffs and what that meant from a business perspective. Ultimately, all those deals closed, but it's just created this next level uncertainty of like, all right, I can't forecast my cost of raw materials as a chemicals company into Q1 of next year because the tariffs have changed 3 times in 6 months. So I have to figure out how to forecast my budget more effectively. And so what we see is a lot of deals come down to the 9th hour, or the 9th minute, or the last minute possible to close. But hopefully we're starting to see that solidify. And once you have whatever the policy is take shape and stay in shape, you can operate around it.
Yeah. Hopefully there's some more stability that comes to that sooner than later.
It's amazing how important stability is.
Yeah.
Just knowing what's going to happen is a really valuable thing in the business world.
No doubt. No doubt. So from a business outcome perspective, where are you focused for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, our fiscal year is slightly offset. So this is my last week of Q3. I start my Q4 next week. We've got 4 deals with Fortune 200 companies out in the signature process. So that, you asked me, I know that's a more tactical answer than what you're looking for, but I'm very, very close to that and making sure those are closed. But the other thing that we're big on, we are heavily enterprise oriented, and our growth from a net retention and upsell perspective is kind of the lifeblood of the business. And so we're really focused on how do we get our customers to go from 5 sites to 25 sites. We have 2 customers now, more than 25 facilities live globally, and that's the playbook. And so I'm heavily focused on not only how do we sell it, but how do we deliver it? How do we ensure consistency from an operations perspective? How do we ensure consistency from a product perspective? And so it's really that scaling question is the top of mind, outside of closing out Q3 strong here in the next 5 days.
Gotcha. And so we briefly touched on how AI has kind of accelerated the mindset of your client base and their willingness to adapt and just compare everything to ChatGPT. How are you guys focused on integrating AI into your product and your operations?
Yeah, so a couple areas. From an internal perspective, we started to integrate AI more often. I won't say which model we're using. We're using one of the large models that you would know immediately, right? But it's not ChatGPT. That's one of the other ones. But we're integrating that into a lot of our internal workflows, right? How do we actually build out more playbooks faster for more delivery types? At the same time, from a marketing perspective, it's moving away from SEO into actually like AIO, right? Like how do you optimize for a ChatGPT prompt? what does ChatGPT say about your company? What does Gemini say about your company? And so reorienting our marketing to be much more aligned with how people actually buy and do market research and away from the legacy ways of kind of like just traditional internet search. And then, as I mentioned, inside
Losing traction there, and
what's that?
now Google's using traction, and now everybody's coming out with their AI powered browsers, and
We
so
have
it's
to.
definitely changing the landscape.
Yeah, it is. And then from a customer perspective, creating more prompts in the product so that way they can integrate their own AI tools into our product as well. And so they can start to do internal synthesis. A lot of our major enterprise customers have made that investment on their side. And so we're thinking about more and more native integrations where our tools complement and support their tools, and their ability to self-serve and self-research goes beyond what we provide. We still think there's a huge differentiation in having expertise and having really deep domain knowledge. But if you can integrate with how they're using a chat GPT, for instance, it just becomes more and more powerful for their workflows and a faster and faster impact to what we're trying to accomplish.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, Vernon, you've been around into different companies, into different industries. What are some brutal lessons you've learned along the way that if you could tap your younger self to go different, what would those be?
This lesson is brutal but true, and maybe sounds harsher than what I mean, but it's the first thing I thought of when I heard brutal. I've never looked back in my career and thought I should have fired somebody slower than what I'd done. So it's one of those things where that old adage of hire slow, fire fast, and just really internalizing that of you're never going to be perfect in every hire. And it's not even a lot of times the person's fault, right? Their skills just may not be a fit. It may not be a culture mesh. But as soon as it's become clear it's not a fit, you have to pull the cord. You just have to. Like there's dragging it out is bad for the business, it's bad for the shareholders, and it's bad for the person, right? And so that's the most brutal lesson I've ever really learned. And just, really reflecting on that is getting to that point. And once your gut says it's time, it needs to be days before action is taken, not weeks, months, quarters of performance improvement and a bunch of that stuff. You gotta move fast. I think the other brutal lesson, and as much as everybody wants to, particularly early stage companies, you always build these big rosy financial models and 3-year forecasts and all these plans. I came, as I mentioned, Granger and Apollo, big public companies. Once you're in startup land or even scale up land, like a forecast is useful, but really outside of the next 3 quarters, 4 quarters, you're going to recast and recast and recast again. And so it's just having that knowledge of you have to be incredibly dynamic on your change. And the reason I bring that up as brutal is, the first time I was going through this process and putting out a plan and showing it to investors and talking them all through it, and then you miss 2 quarters in and you have to go back and deal with all the fallout from an investor perspective, an employee perspective, and you get the bungee cord effect of like you hire a bunch for these future plans and then you have to fire a bunch because you miss. Like just being really cognizant of the fact that it will be dynamic, it will likely change. You can continue to move up and to the right, but never rely on like a 3-year model to run your business and be a replacement for you as a CEO and your instinct and your judgment. And so that's the thing that I've really been focused on in Voxel is like, hey, we're growing 130, 140% year over year. That doesn't mean we're going to go out and spend like a drunken sailor or hire every person we could possibly think of hiring, right? I've learned that the hard way when we've done that. We're still going to treat every hire as precious. Every dollar spent is the lifeblood of the business and the oxygen that keeps us moving forward. And that's from the learning that the hard way in the past, where you're growing and you have cash and you spend it, and then all of a sudden something happens like a COVID, and you're forced to adjust, and you're kind of stuck holding the bag with really hard decisions that could have been.
Yep. No, and all good points. And, business plans and forecasts should be dynamic. And especially in a fast scaling company that's earlier stage. And I couldn't agree more. And that's excellent advice, because when you're growing at those rates, there's no exact playbook for how you need to pivot past a quarter or two.
I think this is super important. I learned this when I came to my first early stage company, and I was kind of like, smart. I thought I was smarter than everybody, right? Just thought I was and thought I knew best and was doing strategy and all this ops work. And you're like, the customer doesn't know what they're talking about. Or like, tell the sales team, like, here's what you got to do. And like, here's the PS playbook and you charge for this. And if they don't like it, they're a negative margin customer, fire them and move on. because that's what you do when you have 1 million customers. It's not what you do when you have 20 or
Right.
25 or 30. And someone said to me at the time, he's like, look, Vernon, you're super smart, but I'm going to tell you the 2 rules of being a great software executive. Rule number 1 is that the customer is always right. He's like, rule number 2 is refer back to rule number 1. That's it. That's the only rule. And if you forget that, you're going to fail. And he's like, it doesn't mean they're literally right. That doesn't mean build every feature they're telling you. But if they're not buying more, if they're not using more, if they're not adopting more, if they're churning, that's a you problem. That's not a them problem. And I've like carried that tattooed on my heart for the last 9 years as a core tenet for what I believe, because churn will kill a business faster than anything. And customer sentiment is the most controllable thing you can have as a business.
Awesome. Great advice. Vernon, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today and sharing your story of the different ventures you've been involved with, how you've gone about it. The mission of Voxel with workplace safety is just phenomenal. Excited to see how you continue to make advancements there. Before we wrap, what's your no BS advice for today's tech leaders out there trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these uncertain times?
I think the no BS advice is you started a business for a reason. Trust your gut. And you're going to have 1 million. No, this is going to be for the VCs of the world to cover their ears. You're going to have 1 million different VC people who try to tell you how to operate, who try to tell you what's useful. And never forget their incentives are aligned with yours, but they're not one for one with your customers. And so you have to know deeply why you started the business. Trust your gut for making the right decisions. Bring in those perspectives and those data points, but never lose sight of the fact that you're ultimately the CEO and entrepreneur that started it, and you have to own it. And you can't pass that judgment, blame, or decision making to anybody else.
Awesome. Vernon, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you liked the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, we'll just send it to your competitors. It might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.